Unit 8 is about classification and a new word that you may not have heard before, taxonomy. I'm guessing you've heard about classification before. We'll take a look at taxonomy on the next slide. Objective 1 is to know the definition of taxonomy, which is basically just a fancy way of saying classification. It's classification based on similarities, and taxonomy is where each organism gets a universally accepted name. And the vocabulary term that you need to know is a taxon is a group at any level of organization. So a group in the same kingdom is a taxon. A group in the same species is a taxon. It's just a generic term for all the different levels of organization. Objective 2 is to know those taxonomic levels, those taxa is plural, from domain to species in the correct order. So its domain is the most general and broad. Then we go kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. Species, you can look at the name, that word itself, and you can see similarities to the word specific. So species is the most specific and individualized taxa of them all. There are different ways you may have learned these in order before. King Philip called us over for good soup, or came over for good soup. I don't know. You probably have some different ways of learning this, but you could say, Dear King Philip came over for good soup, if you wanted to add domain. That domain was added more recently as a broader category, and we'll get into why that is later on in the unit. Objective 3, you need to know that if two species share more specific taxonomic levels, they're more closely related. So if you look at these three different animals, I'll give you a hint and say that they're animals, you might be able to get some sort of clues from those scientific names, but even if you didn't know what those animals were, or you couldn't get a clue from those scientific names, the fact that these first two share this name right here, the genus name, means that they're more closely related. Now, to be fair, I'll give you what these different ones are. Canis lupus is a wolf. Canis familiaris is a dog, and Felis domesticus is a cat. Objective 4 is that regarding the taxonomic levels of genus and species, that those make up a scientific name. And you need to know how a scientific name is written. So here are your guidelines. Both names are in italics. The genus, which is the first word, is capitalized, and the species, which is the second word, is not capitalized. You have 3 examples on this previous slide. Let's go back and take a look. These are 3 different scientific names: Canis lupus, Canis familiaris, and Felis domesticus. Now you can't see the words there. So what you have, Canis lupus, you have the genus name is the first word, that's capitalized, Canis, Canis, Felis. You have both words in italics, and then the second word is the species name, and that is not capitalized. So it goes genus, species, genus, species, genus, species, like that. So these are your guidelines for writing scientific names. Finally, Objective 10, you need to know a little bit of history about classification. Aristotle, in ancient Greek times, was the first one to classify plants and animals into 2 different categories. And so he only saw that there were 2 kingdoms, plants and animals. He didn't have the advantage of having a microscope to see the microscopic world, and he considered fungi to be in the plant category. Carolus Linnaeus still used the two-kingdom system, but he came up with what we just learned, which was the binomial nomenclature. If you look at the word binomial, the prefix bi means two, and nom, nome, is Latin for name. So it's sort of redundant. You have bi meaning two, nome, nomial, referring to name, and then nomenclature means a naming system. So Linnaeus was in charge of that. Aristotle recognized two kingdoms, plants and animals, as did Linnaeus, but he came up with the official naming system.